I'd say this lifetime, not this year. PSG then, back-to-back champions, defeating Arsenal 4-3 on penalties. Only Real Madrid had done it before, retained the Champions League title. PSG adding their name to that record. Arsenal still waiting then for that first ever win in the Champions League final. For more on this, let's welcome in Stuart Robson joins us, as does Jurgen Klinsmann. Overall, Craig, not a final that will live long in the memory for neutrals, but will, of course, for PSG.
Yeah, back-to-back, dominated the game. Weren't as creative as they normally are, but that's a lot down to Arsenal, who were very defensive, particularly after they scored. So, yeah, it wasn't that great final, and both teams were tired in the end in extra time. You could see that, and that's understandable. But you saw that graphic there just before we came back in with the stats in the game. And how you can argue that PSG weren't the better side. It seems it didn't matter what country you were in, whether you were in the UK or whether you were here, it was Arsenal TV. And a lot of credit to them for defending the way they did. But let's lay it out on the table. When they scored after 6 minutes, they tried to defend their way to the 90th minute. Had it been PSG who scored after 6 minutes, they would have carried on attacking and probing and trying to win the game. And that's the contrast in how these two teams approach not only the final but approach football. PSG are very progressive at the moment, and yes, Arsenal have won the Premier League, but PSG are very progressive. They want to probe and press and attack and continually try and use their guile and their skill. And Arsenal regressed into trying to defend their way through 84 minutes plus injury time. And that's tough to do. I mean, they almost pulled it off, but that's tough to do. So yeah, I mean, a valiant effort from Arsenal, but in terms of a football game, PSG by far, even not at their best, by far the better of these two sides.
It was so reminiscent of the Euros final a few years ago in Wembley between England and Italy, where England go up early, and instead of taking a step forward and continue to press Italy, they took a step back. And it's not surprising that Arsenal took a step back. We were watching the game, and as a goal goes in from Kai Havertz, and it was a great finish from Kai Havertz, we all said to ourselves, oh boy, here we go. Because instead of trying to figure out how to break down PSG, who were vulnerable defensively, no, they decided to take a step back and give all the initiative to PSG, who were not great, who were very slow in their possession, who kept the possession of the ball in front of Arsenal and never really probed in behind, certainly not in the first half. And Arsenal were unable to figure out that, you know what? If we take a few chances going forward, we can trouble this back line. Anytime that Arsenal put a ball in between the two center backs of PSG, they allowed the ball to bounce. William Pacho didn't know what to do. Marquinhos was late. And it felt like there was an opportunity to be created. But Arsenal chose not to test that, not to try to expose the vulnerabilities of PSG. They decided to go back to what they think they do best, which is defending. And it has proven to be the case in the Premier League. It did not prove to be the case today. Again, to Craig's point, they almost got there, but almost doesn't count. In the end, Arsenal didn't take a step forward when there was a chance to do that. And in giving the initiative to PSG, you run a risk. They were punished because of it.
Jurgen?
Yeah, I think we all hoped, after the early goal from Kai Havertz, this will be an attacking-minded match, because now obviously PSG has to go at them, and hopefully Arsenal keeps with it, and goes for a second goal as well. So, but then the more the game went on, it didn't happen. Arsenal decided just to be very, very conservative and first and foremost to defend and just wait maybe for here and there a small opportunity. They didn't have a clear opportunity anymore the whole game through. And yes, they played defensively well. They didn't give too many clear chances to PSG. I mean, there was maybe the post that Kvaratskhelia hit then in the second half, and also the 2-3 other occasions, but never really chances that you thought, okay, that had to be a goal. It had to be a goal. But I don't think that in a game where you then go into extra time and then obviously you go into penalty shootout where the margin is so little, that this game plan will work out. And as we saw, the game plan from Arteta then didn't work out. And you give away a Champions League title, unfortunately, in a way that when you look at it now, you watch that game over again, which the coaches will do, then you probably tell yourself that you should have been a little bit more attacking-minded. You should have tried more to go for the second goal. And you have the players to do that. You have the players that could really hurt Paris Saint-Germain. But they were pretty much not in action anymore after Kai Havertz's early goal. And therefore, I really think, as you said, PSG deserves this second title in a row. They've done more for the game overall. And, huge compliment to them.
Robbo?
Well, first of all, Arsenal, when they went back to the defensive shape, they were allowed to go back into defensive shape because PSG didn't pass the ball into the front areas enough. They didn't get enough crosses into the box. And when they did get crosses into the box, they had nobody in there because Dembele was going here, there and everywhere. Fabian Ruiz was trying to make runs. So it made it fairly easy for Arsenal. They played like the 80s. It was a 4-4-2 and the two centre-forwards, or the number 10 and the centre-forward came back a little bit deeper. And when they did get to 1-1, PSG, Arsenal went full 1980s and went long ball. They brought on Gyökeres to play alongside Havertz, and all they did was kick the ball long, hope to win knockdowns and play from there. And yeah, PSG were the better side, but they can play a lot better. It was a bit like Luis Enrique's Spanish side in the European Championships a little while ago when he didn't do particularly well. But they had loads of possession, easy possession, but didn't do enough with it in that first 60 minutes.
But I think you give some credit to, not from an attacking point of view, but some credit to Arsenal. And I do agree. I mean, I do think they were allowed to get back in to those defensive positions rather easily. But then it became very frustrating for PSG. And it is, and we always say it, when cup competitions, even when you're playing a side from a lower league, if you allow them to get back in to a good defensive structure, basically on the edge of their box, it can be very difficult for a lot of teams with much more talent. So when you've got two teams that are pretty much, in terms of they're on a par with the squads and the players they've got, maybe PSG slightly more talented and technically, but then it becomes very frustrating and very difficult, and you do tend to wander around. So I understand that a little bit, that they would go from right to left into Kvaratskhelia and there was nothing really on, they'd come back out, and it made for quite a boring game. I'll give Arsenal fair play to them for that defensive side of it. But this is two cup finals now, one the Carabao and one with a lot more at stake in the Champions League final. They've tried to defend their way to both. Now, they were horrible against Manchester City at Wembley and lost. And people will say, well, yeah, Kepa played, he made a mistake. But it doesn't matter. They were never even in the game. And they've tried to do it again today. And as Jurgen said, they have a big squad. They have a very good squad, one of the best in Europe, Arsenal. And we saying they can't go toe-to-toe. 70-odd% possession against 20-odd. That's too big a disparity. That's just allowing possession for possession's sakes. You have to narrow that gap a little bit. 60-40, 55-45, just to give yourself more time, more on the ball, more possession with a purpose. Sometimes you'll get away with defending, and your keeper playing well, as David Raya did, and you might win the odd football match against elite level competition. But more often than not, I think you'll lose. And I don't think Arsenal were anywhere near progressive enough tonight, and the plaudits that are coming their way because they tried to defend their way to the Champions League title with one of the best squads in Europe is embarrassing.
And to further the point about the difference in possession and how Arsenal was so willing to just forgo the possession, to just give the ball to PSG. From Arsenal kickoff, from their kickoff, their play is to just lump the ball straight up in the air. Now, look, we have managers here in the panel, former managers. How is that, when you value the ball, when the ball is the most important thing, how kicking the ball straight up in the air to the opposition, how is that productive? How does that set you up for success? You're already saying, by design, because this is obviously something that has been discussed and this is what we're going to do, Mikel Arteta is saying, we don't want the ball, give it to them. Put it straight up in the air, give it to them, and we're going to sit right here. That cannot be the way that you approach the game when you are a top side. And Arsenal are one of the top teams in Europe. Of course, they were minutes away from winning this final. But it cannot be that your approach is, you know what, we're just going to forgo the possession altogether and we're just going to give it to PSG and we're going to trust that we're going to be hard to break down. It cannot come down to, oh, we got a throw in. Here we go. Here's the set piece that we're looking for. There's got to be more to Arsenal than desperation, set pieces, and just throwing the ball up in the air in order for them to deserve to win this final.
If anything,